Hello again, this is part 2 of a video tutorial series for Lectora on how to create a customer testimonial page. And last time we talked about creating a color scheme using color.adobe.com and bringing that into Lectora to create some swatches. And now we're going to talk about getting started creating our page with the background and the title. But first I want to go over a couple things, and that is toggling these visibility checkboxes. It's something that is extremely important if you're doing any kind of heavy editing, but it's not turned on by default. So in order to turn these visibility checkboxes on, we go up here to File, Preferences, and there's on the General tab that pops up first, the second checkbox down, it says Show Visibility Checkboxes in Title Explorer. You want to make sure that is checked. And while you're in there, you might as well also check Show HTML Published Object Names in Object Properties. That's just something that if you get into some more advanced stuff, it's good to have that showing up. But it's not something that's going to affect anything if you don't use them. So go ahead and click OK. And now you should be able to toggle those on and off. So starting our page, first thing we want to do is put our background on the page. Now I used the background wizard, which is up here in the tools. So when that pops up, the first thing it asks you is, do you want to use this on just this page, or do you want to apply this background to the entire title? I'm going to go ahead and just use it on this page. And then it has a few options. You can use a solid color, you can use an image with textured background. I'm going to go ahead and stick with gradient, which is just fading one color into another. And depending on what you're doing, a subtle gradient is usually best. So these default colors fading one into the other typically can not look so great. So stay subtle if you can. I'm going to stick with my very light green fading into white. And I change the direction of the gradient from left to right to top to bottom. And you have the option to change the size of the gradient. If you put it at 100%, it's going to look like the color is fading all the way from the top to all the way to the bottom. I'm keeping it at 30. Click Finish, and there we go. Doesn't show up very well in the video, but it's just a light green that fades to white. It gives the page a little extra visual emphasis, which is good. So next, let's talk about our title. In order to create our title, I'm going to add a text block. And by default, it puts it right in the corner. I'm going to drag it over to about there. And then in the corner, I'm going to drag both my width and my height over to the other side. Now you might be asking yourself, okay, where did these lines come from? These blue lines. These are my guidelines that I've created. And to create those, you first have to turn your rulers on. You can do both of those by coming up here to View, Show Rulers, and Show Guides. Make sure those are both checked. And then when you have your mouse cursor over a ruler, you can click and drag a grid onto your stage or screen, whatever it's called in Lectora. And then if you want to move those again, you hold your Control key when you're moused over it, and then you'll get this icon that says, okay, we can move it again. And then click while still holding Control down, and you can move them again or just pull them off screen completely. So that's how I've got these guides here. And you even have the option, if you want, you can snap to the guides to make sure everything is aligning perfectly to the grid that you've created. So if I move this and I come close, it's going to snap right there. So our title was, what are our customers saying? And I changed that from the default teeny tiny Arial to Rockwell size 29. And you can go ahead and you don't have to use these fixed numbers. You can go ahead and type in your own if you need to. Question mark. Okay. And then I changed that from black to one of my swatches. So here's a good example of where the swatches come in handy. I'm going to come down here with my text box selected, change my color to my text using the eyedropper. Just click on my swatch, and there we go. My text box changes color. Now there's one more thing I want to talk about, and it's a cool trick in Lectora. Just going to rename this here to title, and I'm going to go ahead and copy. I like to use Control-C to copy. You can always, of course, right-click, go to copy. And then on top, I'm going to paste that right on top of my existing title. And I'm going to rename that title Drop Shadow. And here's a nice little trick. With that selected, make sure it's selected, and then click on it on the stage. And then use your down arrow just a couple times. I'll do it 3 just so, yep, 3, just so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to change that, in this case, to white, but a drop shadow typically works with something other than white because you're usually using a white background. Now it looks like my text is all changed to white, but that's just because I have this one selected. This is what it looks like, and if we zoom in now, and I'm going to bump it up just for emphasis into this green here so you can really see. If I zoom in all the way, what you can see is happening is my text almost has this 3D effect going on, but really all I've done is just created a separate text box and placed it on top in this, or underneath, depending how you, in the Title Explorer I'm placing it on top, but since whatever's below on the bottom shows up on top and on the actual stage here. It's called Lectora's inheritance model, and once you figure that out, a lot of things start to make sense. So let's zoom back to 100%. Move that to about where we want it. Looks good. Don't need our swatches anymore. And there's one more thing I want to talk about with the text, and that is render text as image when published. I want to do that on both my text boxes, and the reason for that is I'm using a font that is not what's considered a web-safe font. The problem with the web and fonts, even though there's some workarounds being created, the problem is that if you use a font in Lectora that isn't on someone else's machine, your web browser, their web browser, is going to default to either Arial, Helvetica, or Times New Roman, which you most likely don't want, especially in this case. I have this nice Rockwell font going on here. So that's why I'm rendering as an image. That way it will for sure show up like that on everyone's computer, no matter what fonts they have installed on their system. So thanks for watching, and come back for part 3 where we'll start to create these little talk bubbles. Thanks.